Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise tonight to pursue a question I put to the Prime Minister on April 6th. April 6th was 2 days after a quite devastating report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It was from Working Group 3 of the 6th Assessment Report. And what it told me when I read that report was, oh my God, we have less time than I thought. Because the timeline for action to avoid going above 1.5 degrees or even holding to below 2 was just shortened considerably. So what I asked the Prime Minister on 2 days later was if anyone had briefed him on this new documentation from the IPCC, and did he understand how rapidly the window on 1.5 degrees was closing. Now, unfortunately, in the Prime Minister's answer, he revealed that he had not been briefed, not possibly. The answer he gave was the usual response that we're doing a wonderful job. What he said was that we have put forward a very comprehensive plan, that we are committing to reducing our emissions, and we will reduce them by 40% from 2005 levels in the next 8 years. That statement alone confirmed that no one had briefed him, or if they had, he chose to reject the advice. Because saying we have a doable and concrete plan is not the same thing as saying that it is adequate. Now, I'm going to do something I probably shouldn't attempt to do at midnight in this place, is read from the summary for policymakers, give a reference to the paragraph and page, and decipher some fairly impenetrable language. So if the Prime Minister or his staff should happen to watch this late show, maybe they'll understand that they are proposing a plan that does not preserve any hope of holding to 1.5 degrees. So here it is from paragraph C.1, page 22, Working Group 3, 6th Assessment Report, April 4. Quote, global greenhouse gas emissions are projected to peak between 2020 and at the latest before 2025 in global modeled pathways that limit warming to 1.5 and that limit warming to 2 degrees and assume immediate action, close quote. Now I have to explain that the way the IPCC writes is somewhat impenetrable. So they are not projecting something that will happen. What they're saying is, and the sentence would make more sense if it was reversed, if they said, all the models we have worked through, all the pathways we have found that hold to 1.5 or 2 require that between 2020 and at the latest before 2025, we begin to see a total drop in emissions. So the word peak is to suggest that no later than before 2025, total greenhouse gas emissions must begin to drop, and the highest level they ever achieve is before 2025. Now, this is seriously concerning because going above 1.5 or 2 is not a political target. We can't negotiate with the atmosphere. We don't negotiate. The physics and the chemistry of the atmosphere tell us from the best peer review process of science in the history of the world, the IPCC, that we have to ensure that greenhouse gas levels begin to drop by then, or the window on holding on to a livable world will close, and close forever. It does not reopen. And going above 1.5 or 2 degrees is not a political target, I repeat. It's about whether global climate systems remain hospitable to our species. And if we exceed those, our children may be condemned to an unlivable world.
Undersecretary to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my friend and colleague from Saanich Gulf Islands for her remarks and agree with her that the recent IPCC report is a stark reminder of the impacts of climate change and the urgency for action. And as climate impacts intensify, it is only becoming more obvious that moving to a clean, net zero economy is critical to protecting the well-being of Canadians and communities and securing Canada's economic prosperity. At COP26, Canada announced it will take additional action to significantly reduce GHG emissions from the oil and gas sector by setting emission caps. At COP26, Canada also joined over 100 countries in signing the Global Methane Pledge to reduce global anthropogenic methane emissions by 30% by 2030. Canada will lead the way on oil and gas methane by going beyond our current target of 40 to 45% by 2025 to reduce emissions by 75% by 2030. As countries and businesses around the world move rapidly towards net zero emissions, more ambition is needed today to ensure that Canada is not left behind and can secure a foothold in a low carbon future. In 2021, the Canadian Net Zero Emissions Accountability Act became law. The Act enshrines Canada's commitment to achieve net zero emissions by 2050, establishes Canada's 2030 target as the first key milestone for this path, and ensures a transparent and accountable process in meeting our climate objectives. The 2030 Emissions Reduction Plan, or the ERP, was established on March 29th and is the first of many to come under the Act. The ERP is more than about achieving incremental GHG emissions reduction to reach Canada's 2030 target. It is also about putting in place foundational measures to ensure that Canada's future is not only carbon neutral, but also makes energy alternatives more affordable and creates new sustainable job opportunities for workers. The ERP includes a suite of new mitigation measures and strategies building on the foundation set by the Pan-Canadian Framework and the 2020 Strengthened Climate Plan, and considering the best available science, Indigenous knowledge, and the advice of the Net Zero Advisory Body. Achieving Canada's climate objectives will be a whole of economy, whole of society effort, Mr. Speaker. Every economic sector has a role and responsibility to reduce emissions, but the pathway to achieving emissions reduction will look different for each. The 2030 ERP takes into account this reality, sets out guideposts for each sector to further reduce emissions, and highlights the measures and strategies towards an emissions reduction of 40% below 2005 levels. We are taking action, Mr. Speaker, in the electricity sector, and will work with provinces and utilities to establish a Pan-Canadian Grid Council to promote clean electricity infrastructure investments. I see I'm running a little short on time, Mr. Speaker, but we're doing many, many more things, including investing in nature and natural climate solutions to deliver additional emissions reductions and making significant new investments to support a sustainable future for Canadian farmers. Mr. Speaker, and as the honourable member knows, we will be instituting an emissions cap and taking further measures to reduce our emissions.
The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Mr. Speaker, I now have to ask the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, who is an old friend, if he has read the IPCC report, because his answer reflects the usual complacency that all the things the government is doing, and they are doing things, there's no denying there are many, many programs, but the totality of those programs does not ensure that we can hold to 1.5 or 2 degrees. In fact, it does the opposite, Mr. Speaker. Net zero by 2050 by itself isn't science, it's a marketing slogan. What we have to look at is that last year, 619 people died in British Columbia in 4 days. Wildfires across the province, floods in November, all of what's happened right to Canada right now is at 1.1 degrees global average temperature increase. We're on track for 3 times more. It's not survivable. Nothing matters if you don't get this right. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, again, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the honourable member for her passion, her advocacy, which I share, and just to assure her that we will continue to work with other levels of government, Indigenous peoples, experts, industry, stakeholders, and interested Canadians to build on our collective action to drive further reductions and put Canada on that path to net zero. And I thank her once again for her questions and comments.